They know that James is the beta. They're not prepared to
yeah, it's the iPhone. You know how like identifies photos and says like brassiere, if like it's a woman in a bra.
Oh yeah.
It did that just because it's all my guns.
It could tell. It knew who was boss in the
Exactly.
photo.
Yeah, no.
What have they trained this thing on?
We have an exceptionally valuable, high-profile guest for you today.
Not me.
No. It's obviously a high priority for us to bring on the world's foremost thinkers, speakers, storytellers, raconteurs, etc., to talk about YouTubers. Our single point of fixation on this podcast is YouTubers, what they're up to, their net worth.
Beefs, obviously.
Beefs is huge for us. Yeah. We love beefs and interrogating them. So we brought someone on who can really dive into all those aspects deeper than anyone else that we've ever had on the podcast before. We're joined today by writer Max Read, who has written for New York Times, New York Magazine, New York Times Magazine. He used to be an editor at Gawker. He writes a newsletter called Read Max. It's at readmax.com, readmax.substack.com. It's one of the two. I'll put it in the show notes.
There's a big audience crossover actually. We used to be Substack people until literally like a week ago, and yours was always one of the recommended ones.
Oh, that's true. It always puts you right next to it, which makes this an even greater sort of crossing of the streams. But we've brought Max on because he wrote a article for the New York Times a couple months ago on MrBeast, who is someone that we've wanted to do an episode about for a while. Max, welcome to Down Round.
Thank you for having me. I feel that's an incredible introduction. I feel like an explorer returning from the fetid jungle to bring you news of the outer territories.
Well, that's exactly how we take it. We interpret it as well. Tell us who MrBeast is. We're assuming that we know nothing about MrBeast, which is wrong. I know a lot about MrBeast. Tell me who MrBeast is.
I mean, it's funny. I think you have to be in a really specific demographic to genuinely know nothing about MrBeast, which is like you can't be younger than 25 because then you will know who MrBeast is the way that people who are younger than 25 just know things that adults aren't supposed to know about. And if you're older than, say, if you have a kid, and if you're older than, say, 40 and you have a kid, like an adolescent aged kid, then you know who MrBeast is because your kid knows because your kid is under 25. So the non-knowledge of MrBeast is really limited to like senior citizens without grandchildren and people in the precise, I imagine, age bracket of this podcast, listenership. It's just childless 30-somethings. Let's say
you've nailed.
So I'm pleased to bring to those people exactly the knowledge they need to have about MrBeast.
You've got him dead to rights.
He's a YouTuber, obviously. His name is Jimmy Donaldson. He's from North Carolina. He's 20. Actually, he himself is 25 now. And he is the biggest single YouTuber on the planet. He has more subscribers to his channel than anybody except for T-Series, which is a Bollywood music label, movie studio. He's bigger than PewDiePie. He's bigger than the Paul brothers. He's bigger than Coco Melon, which is like a huge deal to people like me who have toddlers. He's known for doing these really extravagant kind of combination game show, reality show, charity stunts. He'll do stuff like he'll have 100 girls, 100 women, and 100 men, and he'll put them all each in a circle, and whichever group of people lasts longer in terms of like not leaving the circle gets $500,000 to split amongst themselves. Or when he reached a certain number of subscribers, he bought an island and he brought over a couple dozen subscribers of his to do sort of Survivor style reality challenges, the winner of which would keep the island. And he has gotten more and more over the last couple of years into a kind of, he's sort of styled himself a philanthropist. And if you hadn't encountered MrBeast before this year, you probably encountered him in January or February when he published a video where he paid for surgery for 1,000. He paid for cataract surgery for 1,000 people, for 1,000 legally blind people, and did this 10-minute video where he sort of he brought some people in to a hospital. We interviewed them before and after the surgery. Cataract surgery is like a relatively cheap outpatient procedure that it's like, I think it costs about $5,000 per person. You know, if you could be legally blind, you'd have cataract problems that make vision cloudy. And the doctor I think the procedure is literally, they take like an eyedropper and they suck it up into the eyedropper and then they like give you a new like fake cataract basically. So that's the science part of the podcast. That's the science and medicine part of the podcast.
Thank you, Max.
So anyway, he did this, and this video in particular, more than any other video I've seen, sort of slipped the boundaries of YouTube, where he is a huge celebrity, and entered the kind of the Twitterverse, the place where, you know, older people hang out. And many of us were completely shocked at the fame that this guy had reached, at the sort of insanity of this video, which kind of posed what was obviously an act of genuine charity as a kind of weird game show video game. I feel like the thing to explain that's really hard to talk about on a podcast is, and I think the reason this particular video was so controversial is that it has one of the objectively most insane thumbnails that that I've ever seen in a YouTube video. That I like, the only way you can describe it is as it looks like a photoshopped. I mean, there's a Photoshop of MrBeast, like with this really big, goofy grin on his face.
Yeah.
And he looks like, this is going to be totally lost on Australian listeners, he looks like the most 25-year-old North Carolina dude you've ever seen in your entire life. And I'm sure you have guys like this. So just go look up a photo of MrBeast.
We'll make it the artwork.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got equivalents. Don't you worry.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And he's got this big goofy smile, and he's got a kind of like a strip mall haircut, and he's got his arm over the shoulder of what I believe to be a stock photo image of like a 6-7-year-old kid who's got like bandages that he's lifting up over his eyes, and he looks shocked. I mean, the first thing I thought of was the poster for Come and See, which is the sort of legendary, horrifying war movie about like what it's like to witness war crimes. And there's MrBeast like grinning like a goofball in this, what almost is a sort of like, it might be a hospital room, it might be like a dungeon of some kind. I mean, it looks like a direct-to-video Saw ripoff that they hired the wrong guy to do the Photoshop for. And it did not communicate. If you see this photo, this something, you're not feeling like you're not like going to click on this and be like, this is a good person doing a great thing for a bunch of people, even though objectively that is basically what happened.
Well, that was the weird thing about this. We'll get straight into this, and maybe we can talk about who he is and stuff a bit later. I've never been that across him, and obviously that came across my feed, and I really tried to ignore it, like as much as I possibly could. Much like, you know, the Japanese like suicide forest for
Logan Paul.
Like I tried to avoid that as well. Anyway, but the interesting thing here is like, and there is, I feel like a generational divide where, yeah, as you say, okay, paying for 1,000 people's cataract surgery is fine, but I feel like the cringe or whatever, or the maybe repulsion that some people feel about it is he's quite obviously doing it for kind of clout, right? It's like this member of the clout economy. He's not quietly like Bill Gates, for example, like trying to reduce the population by 95% or whatever. But you know what I mean? Like, it's the clout thing that makes it feel weird.
No, totally. But I guess this is what your article was getting at. And I think what made it interesting is like the down round as well, is just like the fact that if you are under 25, the thought of marrying philanthropy with an absurd, like, clout chasing YouTube algorithm exploiting kind of thing is like normal. That's just, you know, that's the method. That's how you get a message out. That's how you communicate. Whereas if you are, let's say, someone who is aged from 30 to 39, where you kind of get the internet, and well, you do, but on a different level, it's slightly repulsive and like makes your skin crawl. And I feel like that was like the thrust of your article, right? That's what you wanted to have first.
You know, the sort of fight that took over Twitter for a few days over this video was interesting because it became clear at some point that, to the extent that there were two camps in it, that they were sort of talking past each other, that there was, like you're saying, and this is totally my knee-jerk reaction, was this kind of like, it's really gross to marry the kind of the lowest common denominator YouTube attention bait, engagement bait, thumbnail tactics, like video titling tactics, like something that's stuck in my mind is like at the very bottom of the video, there's like a chyron that just counts up the number of people that he's given the surgery to. Like it's like you're watching a speed run. Like there's some kind of like he's getting every star in Mario Galaxy or whatever. It's like he's curing every blind person. He's found one in the corner there, and there's like one up behind the thing, and here's the shortcut to get the extra blind person back here. And so, you know, for if that's your reaction and it was mine, it's sort of like, okay, yes, maybe it's great these people have surgery, but like, what the fuck? And then they're talking to, you know, mostly Zoomers, like young people who are sort of like, what the fuck are you talking about? How has I didn't realize that people were able to do things that didn't require lowest common denominator engagement bait. By which I mean, just like, as far as they were concerned, this was table stakes. This was what you did. There was no way to do quiet, silent philanthropy, like anonymous philanthropy that people would remember many years from now. It was sort of, if he wants people to watch his video, this is what he has to do.
Yeah.
And I think this is particularly interesting with MrBeast because he has this sort of structure for how he works his videos too. Like, so it makes an extra difference because of how he talks about how he makes money.
So, I mean, this is what we can talk about a little bit about the man himself, because it seems like he's someone who has an insane fixation on getting as many views as possible on YouTube. In the same way as like Magellan had the sort of fixation on circumnavigating the world, like this bizarre single-minded focus on that task from when he was a kid or whatever, to like just get as many YouTube video views as possible, and then like accumulating the analytics brain that's required to make that happen. You talk a little bit about that because I know you covered a bit of that in your story as well.
Yeah, he talks about this a lot. I mean, one of the sort of interesting, funny things about YouTube as a platform is the amount of content on YouTube that's just about YouTube and like how to become a YouTuber. And this is something that one of the many alienating things about YouTube, the platform, YouTube, the culture, is the extent to which it feels like a MLM scheme where you're kind of constantly just being asked to like become a YouTuber, and of course you'll make millions. But anyway, I bring that up only to say that there's tons of interviews that MrBeast gives to various YouTube channels whose whole, you know, purpose is to sort of give advice about how to be a YouTuber. So he's talked a lot about his sort of trajectory as a YouTuber, and he's been doing this for 10 years. He's 25. I mean, 12 years, I guess. I think he started when he was 13. And I wonder a little bit if that's just what he says because legally he was not supposed to have been on YouTube before he was 13. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the way he talks about it, he didn't really do anything in high school except YouTube. And not just, and when I say except YouTube, he was making videos. But the other thing he was doing is he had a group of friends, people that he was working with, and they would reverse engineer from popular YouTube's like strategies to do well. So they would, you know, in a sort of admirably insane way, they would look at thumbnails and they'd be like, well, the brightness on this thumbnail is whatever, and the brightness on this thumbnail is this, and this is the bigger one, so we got to put our thumbnail brightness here, and this is the kind of thumbnail we want to do, and this is the kind of headline we want to do. And he just kept plugging away. He sort of famously, for the MrBeast lore, his mom wanted him to go to college.
Speaking of the lore, can we quickly pause there?
Yeah.
Like, who is he? Like, where's he from and stuff?
So he's from North Carolina. He's from the South. He's from a land of like strip malls and mega churches. This is the kind of thing that would get me canceled. How many American listeners do you have? How stereotypical can I get about North Carolina before I get fully?
Something like 12% of our audience are from America, but I believe they're all from the Bay Area.
Okay, and you know what they hate? I'm sure the 12% hate North Carolina. No, actually, my wife's parents live in North Carolina. It's a lovely state. A couple huge, terrible universities. I mean, the universities are very high quality, but they produce awful people. Duke famously produces almost as bad as Stanford in terms of producing evil people.
But is he just like a normal guy? Is he rich? Like,
yeah, I mean, the only thing you communicate is he comes across as the most normal guy. Like, if you imagine a YouTuber in your head, you may imagine a sort of like Speed or the Paul brothers, like a totally manic, like clearly fucked in the head, like needs to be tranquilized as soon as possible, like just completely has... Jimmy doesn't come across like this at all. He doesn't even really come across... Like, when I tell the story about him reverse engineering the success, you think, okay, well, maybe he's a little sort of socially awkward, but he isn't really. I mean, not any more than like a normal person would be. He really comes across as like impeccably decent and normal.
Yeah,
and I
right.
think, and we can get into this, I think this is actually sort of part of what has made him successful as a YouTuber.
The everyman thing.
Yeah. His mum's wanted him to go to college, and he said,
Yeah.
"No."
He said no. I mean, I think he comes from, a sort of lower middle class background. Not poor, but definitely not insanely wealthy. The kind of family where if you have an opportunity to go to college, your mom is going to insist that you go to college. And he said, no, I'm going to do YouTube, which he did. And he really stuck it out and he plugged away. And I think he was sort of slowly getting more and more popular. He's doing like Call of Duty streams. I mean, the thing I think about him is that you can kind of track to some extent the culture of YouTube, the kinds of things that YouTube is about and what it's doing if you follow his career, because he's such a like student of the algorithm, so to speak. Whatever MrBeast is doing at any given moment, you can be pretty sure that that's what the algorithm is rewarding. It's 2012 or whatever, 2010. He's doing Call of Duty streams. He's just, he's recording himself playing COD and putting the videos up. And then sometime in the early 2010s, he does a video where he counts to 1 million. I'm actually can't even remember what number he counts to. Let's just say he counts to 1 million over the course of 24 hours and uploads an edited video of the process. And this goes viral. I mean, it goes like people loved it. It really attracted a huge number of subscribers. And in the MrBeast mythology, this MrBeast self mythology, he likes to talk about this video as the video that taught him the most important lesson, which is that effort is the key differentiator, that people really like to see you hurt yourself, basically, that they want to see you put a lot into it. So he takes off this and he starts doing these kind of endurance videos, some of which he still does, like the videos where he like forces people to stay in a circle to win $100,000. That's a version of this sort of endurance thing. He does it much less often these days than he used to.
Yeah, I feel like in a very typical American, and the same is true in Australia, way, he shortcutted the endurance part by raising the stakes with money, right? By like he's giving away $250,000, and that is kind of like the sacrifice, right? It's like, whoa, that's
totally,
he's doing, something crazy here himself.
Yeah. People love big numbers. I think that's his great learning.
What else do you need to know?
If you've got 250,
put a big number in the title of the podcast.
Yeah,
just lie. Just say.
I think we will actually.
Minutes with Max. Yeah,
250,000 minutes with Max Reed.
We paid Max Reed $250,000.
We made him podcast in a circle, and if he left the circle, we killed him. That kind of stuff.
Gave him an island at the end of it, and you could totally. If you wanted to give me an island. So I think you're absolutely right that he has this thing where when he doesn't have a ton of money himself, he's doing these sort of endurance videos, and when all he has is his own time and his own body, he's like sacrificing those. But as he gets more followers, he starts to attract sponsors, and so the kind of next pivot, the next video that becomes important in the MrBeast self-mythology is one where he takes, this is like mid 2010s, and he's getting sponsored by a lot of software companies nobody's ever heard of, that nobody will ever hear from again, that have cash because they've raised a couple rounds, and there's some YouTubers out there. And he gets 10 grand in cash from a sponsor, and he just finds a homeless guy panhandling on the median of a road in his hometown. And he goes up to the guy and gives him 10 grand in cash. And then they do like sort of an awkward little interview. They give the guy a ride somewhere and they drop him off. And like, that's the whole video. And I think that, again, much like the counting video, goes mega viral. There's a kind of, and it shows once again that like, it's not just it's not like endurance, it's the effort, it's the resources that get sort of like put to bear on something that people like. And if there's a feel good, charitable component to it, all the better. And like, I'm being really cynical about this, and I feel like I kind of have to say in his defense that like, and this is part of what makes him a fascinating figure to me, is I think on the one hand he thinks about this stuff really cynically. The weird thing about him is that he thinks about it cynically in the sense that he's pretty transparent about the sort of like algorithmic lessons that are brought to bear by these things. But I think at the same time he genuinely wants to give people money, that there is like a good heart somewhere in MrBeast, that he's like, it's important to him that he's doing it like this, that he's not just, like setting $10,000 on fire as a way of showing off that effort. Because he could easily do that. And I imagine that would also probably go viral.
Totally.
Possibly he has done that, and I'm just going to ignore it because it doesn't fit with
doesn't fit with the narrative. That's fine. Yeah. He's a lovely guy. I get it.
Well, I mean, that is kind of the question, right? Like if the charity stuff wasn't working, as you said, he's a student to the algorithm.
Yeah.
You know, would it go away? Would it like stay?
The reverberations through the culture of that particular genre of video of like I gave a homeless guy $10,000 or whatever have been so immense. Like that format, which he obviously pioneered, like 5 years ago or something, is so common now.
Oh, they're giving cash? I freaking hate it. Like, so like I watch majority of YouTube. I watch is like golf stuff because I'm addicted to golf because you know. Like I'm a normal 35-year-old, and the golf tubers or whatever. It's even kind of gone into that. Like I get 100 people, and the nearest to the pin gets $500, and like they've started doing these cash challenges or whatever. Like it's so icky to me. It's so icky. But
that's pure MrBeast. That's like precisely what MrBeast. That's like such a MrBeast challenge.
Oh, it's obvious that they're doing the same thing, right? They're YouTubers. They're studying the algorithms or whatever, and going like, "Oh, here's what we have to do. We have to just give cash."
And I think one reason that I feel that I have become a kind of quasi apologist for MrBeast is like looking at the videos that are coming from people who are doing what they imagine MrBeast does and how much work. The one that is going to stick in my mind forever, I think went viral on Twitter recently, where it was like TikTokers, they like put a tarp down in the bed of their flatbed truck and they filled it with hot water and then like instant ramen powder and noodles, like hundreds. And then they drove it around. And they clearly staged this entire thing, but they drove it around to homeless guys and they like gave them a spoon and they were like, have some ramen from the bed of our truck, which is just like it was like evil, fake, stupid, like just could not have been a worse, you know.
There's some people, because, you know, obviously he is considering, you know, how much money he's made, how big he's gotten, his list of controversies is relatively short, apart from, you know, the aforementioned people finding the whole enterprise
deeply disturbing,
sick deep in the soul.
Apart from that, and really just like epitomizing like the downfall of society and humanity.
Totally. Apart from that stuff. But then, like, I know there was a guy that did it. There's a bunch of like MrBeast clones in Australia who do exactly the same thing on TikTok and hand money up. And there was a guy who got cancelled because he did a thing where like he wore a cast out in the street in Sydney, and he went around to people, just random people, and said, "Can you help me open my water bottle?" And if they helped them open the water bottle, he would give them $100 or something. And then and if they didn't, like they would essentially be shamed in the video for not helping. So that has him go like an old Greek woman, like, "Will you help me open?" She clearly doesn't understand what he's saying. And walks past, and now this is like that weird sort of like, I know how MrBeast works, but also I'm sicker in the brain than he is, and I don't quite get how to do it in a way that isn't totally alien.
Yeah, there is, but yeah, there is something about as well. I feel like that's a key part of this, and I know you've talked about it, where the viewer thinks, "Oh my god, like I could be the next one to receive $100 for free or 10 grand." In MrBeast's case, like, yeah, I might get 50 grand. It could be me, and there's like a kind of excitement and addictive quality to that, thinking about like, I could be out there on the street. Imagine that. Like, which releases weird serotonin in.
Well, he used to do that one where he was like, he goes up to random people and to see if they follow him. Like they go, "If you follow MrBeast on YouTube, then I'll give you this brand new McLaren sports car or whatever." Which is
and
funny.
he does, and you know, like some of the challenges, like the island one I was just saying, it was all the contestants were subscribers of certain vintages. It was like the 10,000 subscriber, the 250,000 subscriber, the 600,000 subscriber, whatever. And I'm pretty sure I don't remember if this is exactly this, but the earlier a subscriber you were, you got certain like you got like immunity challenges, or there was like some kind of advantage in the
I got to
process.
Again, this is
got to get in now.
If you're a Zoomer, this is normal to you. This is your inner life.
Exactly. This is how you imagine politics works.
And maybe they're right. I don't know. Maybe that's how it works.
Speaking of like the money component, I don't know how much you know about this. Like, he's giving away big sums of money, and I know he's getting mega views, and I know like he had, especially now, has like heaps of revenue sources and is worth apparently $500 million. You know, so a lot of his videos are kind of anywhere between 100 million and 250 million. Do you know how much, not including all of like the outside sponsorships, but like directly from YouTube or whatever, that would get you?
No, I don't have a sense. I think there was, you know, I did as much sort of, you know, I'm not Cy Hirsch or anything. I did as much sort of like poking around as I could. And I didn't find any suggestion that like, so his claim is that he puts basically everything he makes from YouTube back into YouTube videos beyond like, whatever relatively, comfortable living arrangements he has for himself and paying his staff. And as far as I can tell, that's basically true. The sort of flywheel that he presents, which is, like we were just saying, like, sign up for me. Everybody who signs up, everybody who watches I'm gonna make a lot of money from you guys on these views, and I'm just gonna put that money into an even bigger, even crazier, even more insane stunt.
Yeah.
And as far as that's a compelling pitch, if you're 12. And as far as I can tell, he's telling the truth. It's not like he's living in poverty in order to create the sickest YouTube videos you've ever seen, but he is like,
that's a noble life. That's a noble life.
Would be, that's maybe that's the next MrBeast step, is to like wear a hair shirt and be like, I refuse to sleep on a mattress until I've made the greatest YouTube video of all time.
Because that's the crazy thing. My first thought is when I see him giving away $150,000, $250,000, I'm assuming that basically from that video, in one way or another, he's making that back. And obviously, part of it could be investment, broader sponsorships and stuff. But those numbers just sound crazy to me. And I'm sure there's like a bunch of people at like TV networks and stuff just being like, holy hell, like how do we compete with this? If you know what I mean? Like a guy, he's putting that much resources into a 15-minute video and somehow making it back. Yeah, big numbers.
It's funny you say TV networks, because I do think the other like sort of part of this is he's doing something very familiar. Like, it's crazy and it's YouTube-y and all this other things. But like, if you squint, it's not that different from the way reality TV has been for 25 years.
I mean,
already we've going back to even before that.
Yeah,
like
Survivor
there's a sort of exactly.
Well, who dares wins?
Who dares wins?
Who dares wins? There was an old show on
Fear Factor, I think they called it over there.
It was a little bit different to Fear Factor, because that had like a game show format. And Joe Rogan, obviously. But Who Dares Wins was an Australian show where a former cricket star would basically just go to shopping centres or shopping malls and just talk to random people and be like, I will give you $500 if you will climb to the top of this very tall pole and jump off. Or like, just like getting random. And again, it's exactly the same thing. Except
that's
Mike Whitney does not make as much money as MrBeast.
But then even that, that MrBeast video where he gets one person from every country in the world to like compete in like the ultimate competition to see which country is best is just like those Japanese kind of, well, I mean, it's Gladiator as well. Like, those running through stupid like obstacle courses and whatnot.
I mean, I love that video, first of all, because it required MrBeast to determine what counts as just MrBeast entering geopolitics as like a determiner of which parts of Palestine count as a country. It's like, to me, that's the pinnacle of the 21st century.
But I think that the dangerous thing is that maybe it will have influence. Maybe MrBeast map.
Yeah, why wouldn't it? To a generation of people, they're going to.
It will impose itself on reality through sheer psychic will. And I think that's huge.
The West Bank counts because MrBeast said it counts. To your earlier point about TV executives watching this, is like part of what's happening is it's not that he's doing this for no profits at all, though that's maybe in some interesting way that's what's happening, but it's also that he's kind of doing this without the whole layer of infrastructure that of like labor infrastructure, technical infrastructure, whatever else that goes into a TV show. And it's funny in another way, because, like game shows and reality shows in particular were created and continue to sort of exist as ways to undermine, at least in the US, like labor agreements between writers and studios or whatever. So MrBeast has seen their shitty anti-union strategies for creating content, been like, I can do you one better. I can do it without executives. I can do it without unions. I can do it with just me and 6 weird fucking guys who also want to be YouTubers and an iPhone camera or whatever, and make hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars. But I do think that at the end of the day with MrBeast, the bargain that his money has to go back into the videos is pretty important to his viewers. I do think that if they felt like he wasn't, he was keeping too much money for himself or something, I mean, this is all sort of hypothetical. I don't know how they would find that out or feel that way. But I do, the people I talk to who are MrBeast fans, the sense of him as an honorable figure, as a person of honor who stands by his word, puts his money in his videos, helps people out, is really important. And if they thought that he was just doing this to make a buck, I think he would lose a lot of fans and viewers.
Did you speak to Mr. Beast himself?
No, Mr. Beast declined to be interviewed by the New York Times Magazine.
That's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate.
Well, I mean, yeah, then I can't. Yeah. I mean, he was the standard, as you guys maybe know as well, that YouTubers, either if YouTubers will talk to you, it probably means they're not actually big enough for you to write about them.
No, totally.
Like a good measure of whether or not a YouTuber is big enough for you to want to write about them is that they absolutely want to have nothing to do with
No,
you.
totally. Yeah. They've got their whole job is distribution. They don't need the puny New York Times.
The clout paradox.
Right. Yeah, totally. Well, that's it.
You're going to ask describe the fan. I was thinking the same thing. And also, as you say, like, part of that is, do they believe the charity stuff? Like, describe who are these fans? How old are they? What are they doing? I mean, there's a lot of them. There's like 300 million of them.
They're just regular guys, and we're peering at them.
Right, exactly. I mean, my guess, we're entering I'm about to say some fully speculative, vibes-based things.
Oh, God, that's what this podcast's all about.
My sense is that, like, the significant and most intense portion of his fans are fully adolescent, like 10 to 13 years old, basically. That these are the people who respond most intensely to the videos, who care the most about him.
Buy the chocolate and all that.
Exactly, like clean up the chocolate in the shopping market.
Oh yeah.
But I talked to rather than call up a bunch of 10-year-olds and expose myself to legal trouble, I talked to a bunch of sort of late teen, like college aged kids who are either have been fans since they were pretty young and are still have like a connection, or just sort of casual fans because they like they're YouTube people and he's like a big famous YouTuber. And the general sense I got was that the sort of mythology of MrBeast as a regular guy who is mostly committed to helping out other regular people and creating awesome YouTube videos. That's like the core that's the descriptive appeal. Like if you ask people why they like him, it's some version of that sort of story, that he's normal. He wants to help people out, and he makes really fun, big, flashy videos.
I actually forgot about the chocolate though, with like the fans fixing the chocolates.
Oh, you're doing freelance, unpaid intern work for Walmart.
He partnered with a chocolate bar brand called Feastables. So there's like a MrBeast Feastables. Apparently, it's a huge hit. But MrBeast complained on Twitter and was like, when I go into the supermarket, a lot of times my Feastables display is not tidied up. So if you see it, can you make sure you tidy it up in the supermarket? And it seems to have gotten a significant number of like human beings with like full control of their mental faculties to like go to supermarkets and like clean up his chocolate bars displays for him, which is just an unbelievable. This real power.
No, that's true.
And I think that what it tells you, like the extent to which people imagine MrBeast fandom as kind of as like mission based. There is like that makes it sound like a video game where you like have missions like clean up the chocolate, which is not what I mean. I mean mission based.
I think it is like that as well, just quietly, but
maybe a little bit. There's like the curing the blind people mission. No, I think it's mission in the sense that they think of it as you're joining a cause to subscribe to MrBeast, and I think the philanthropy is a significant portion of that. The idea, and we can talk about this a little more, that like part of his explicit pitch is you follow me and every view that you give me is going to put 1/10 of a cent in my pocket or whatever it is. And that money is going to go not just to making cool YouTube videos, but like YouTube videos in which other people are helped out with your money. So that part of the pitch of subscribing to MrBeast is joining the philanthropic sort of.
You feel moral by sitting there and consuming like mind-numbing content. Sorry, I'm obviously got some opinions, but you feel like, which is like one of the benefits of like a lot of that kind of content, right? Like I'm doing a good thing. Yeah, like you're given an excuse. Like it's an excuse to kind of sit there and like devour this content and be obsessed with it because you're actually doing a good thing.
Yeah, I mean it's very similar. Well, I mean just to finish the thought that like this. That the sort of cleaning up the chocolate bars becomes an extension of this in some way. I think that like you're on Team MrBeast. You've got this parasocial relationship in the first place that everybody does with their favorite YouTubers. He's asking you a favor, but also he's like, you think of him as the head of the MrBeast International, charity foundation. Like, why not? Like, you figure the money that he makes from these chocolate bars are also going to go to curing blind people in cool videos. So I'm going to help tidy it up so that all this happens. And it should be clear, like, this is not a majority of MrBeast fans. The MrBeast fans I talked to thought like cleaning up the chocolate bar thing was kind of, people who did that were kind of silly and stupid. It wasn't like but there were people. It obviously is. He's affecting enough to people. He means enough to people in that sense. And I think like we're saying, this idea that by subscribing to MrBeast, your watching YouTube becomes this act of charity and philanthropy. That's like sometimes explicitly, but sometimes just sort of implicitly. That's the real pitch. Like that's what gets him more than just your average, relatively charming, relatively talented YouTube producer.
Totally. Like, I mean, look, if you get 300 million people subscribing to you, how many it is? I mean, he's getting a few 100 million views per video. Statistically, there's going to be some silly people in there. There's going to be some cringe individuals.
Yeah,
sure. Maybe higher than the average population segment. Maybe.
I mean, but he might oversample. He might oversample some
on cringe. Yeah, but that's what those thumbnails bring in. The people.
Yeah.
I do dwell on that because there's the argument you can make where it's like YouTube makes like weird, incomprehensible changes to its algorithm. There's like an engineer who's sitting in Mountain View who's like, oh God, I got to tweak this sort of input and this sort of input to like make sure that we're keeping people engaged and that we're not surfacing too much insane, crazy stuff. So there's obviously like on the software engineering level, that stuff is going on. And MrBeast is like supernaturally tuned into it and knows how to make it work. And obviously from this argument to angle, that's like the sort of filter bubble, algorithms rule our lives, blah, 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 blah. It's well covered. I don't need to dive into that too deeply. But on the other hand, you have the argument where it's like, also, perhaps this is the end state of content. It's just like, we finally have the delivery mechanism. This is just what works and what people like to see. And it's like big numbers, extremely high contrast, oversaturated soy face in the thumbnail, the weird, super fast jump cuts.
Yeah. Vague philanthropy.
Exactly. When the ancient Greeks were doing like theater 3,000 years ago, they were on this trajectory. They just weren't there yet. That's how we had to get there. I think that's it's kind of fucked up, but whatever.
When I wrote the piece and I talked to people, and I felt like I didn't even do enough in the piece to kind of present the first half of what you were saying, where it's like you have to keep it in the back of your head while you're saying MrBeast is actually quite good at making these videos and he's very smart about how to approach them. It's like also there's a guy in Mountain View somewhere who's putting his finger on the scale, maybe not even realizing how he is. But I think the sort of the way out of having to choose between these two things is that they're always working against and with one another. That it's sort of like it's obviously very useful as far as Google is concerned for MrBeast to be the face of YouTube versus PewDiePie, because MrBeast so far has not made a single anti-Semitic joke.
Yeah, I was going to say he's avoided the Nazi stuff.
I think I actually have faith. I think MrBeast can go another 4 to 5 years without becoming a Nazi. I think just based on my study of him, I think he's got several more years before it really...
What, a study of his skull shape? Or
he will get there.
He's got a normal skull, I think.
He seems to not spend a ton of time on Twitter, which I think is the really key, the important thing for him, is that he's not looking at people who hate him all the time. So he's just going to be in his bubble and not turn into a crazy Nazi anytime soon, I hope.
PewDiePie is sort of an instructive comparison because he was kind of like, MrBeast surpassed him now. Is that right? He's
last year. About a year ago. And I think there is like a, I don't know that I could objectively say that MrBeast makes better videos than PewDiePie. I don't really even know what that would mean. I don't know that like in the world we're talking about that MrBeast videos are more naturally appealing. So there's this thing where it's like, I think YouTube is more than happy to encourage whatever makeup of its sorting mechanisms currently exists to continue MrBeast's reign on top. And so MrBeast makes videos that do well, and YouTube is like, well, this is good for us, so let's move the algorithm to sustain this doing well. And this happened, this is not like even necessarily new to platforms. I think this is also kind of the way TV has traditionally worked, because you have executives looking at last season's ratings all the time, like what's going to be the next thing to go on. And then every once in a while, something sort of breaks the whole mold and like changes the way people think about it. And then you get a ton of stuff that looks like that coming through.
Yeah.
And in the case of MrBeast, I think he's found a really good, in the context of where YouTube is right now as a corporation, but also in the context of what people are looking for on YouTube and what people want out of it. As YouTube gets bigger, I think one thing that seemed to be the case with people I talked to who are MrBeast fans is like, he's emerging in the wake of several years where like extremely handsome morons in McMansions fought with each other all the time. That was like the pinnacle of the YouTube universe.
Yep.
And I think people kind of got sick of that. It's like, how many Paul videos can you possibly watch? How many? Even PewDiePie has a little bit of that kind of just, this is so dumb, I can't, and this guy is so annoying. And he's like weirdly handsome for like a Swedish video game YouTuber.
Well,
like,
totally,
why is he so good looking?
Yeah. PewDiePie seems to have withdrawn. He's in his like meditating on a mountaintop era or whatever, because he's obviously lost. He hasn't got it anymore. But you know,
he's like the Beatles after they went to India. He's he's in his George Harrison.
Literally, and maybe he'll come back like doing his own philanthropy thing, or come back as a super Nazi, like he's
his own rubber soul or whatever. It would
but
be,
I think it is kind of telling, because I was similarly baffled when PewDiePie became huge and was suddenly by stealth one of the biggest celebrities on earth, even though I had never watched one of his videos, and like really zero exposure in mainstream culture. And I think that's also kind of like, or mainstream media, I guess you could say. I think that's still kind of the case with MrBeast. Like, I don't know, certainly in Australia, it's not like MrBeast is frequently talked about on the news. And even when you have like a celebrity entertainment section in like the breakfast TV shows or whatever, you know, our Good Morning America equivalents, nobody's talking about MrBeast, even though he has such a penetration. And I suppose it's probably a generational thing. But, you know, again, PewDiePie became, again, one of the most famous people on earth from essentially playing like horror video games and squealing like a girl or whatever. Like that was basically his content for a very long time.
I mean, this is like one thing I will say. Well, this is the other thing that I think is true about MrBeast is like he's weirdly more palatable to somebody like me because his stuff is recognizable as reality TV in a way that PewDiePie's wasn't, where I feel fully alienated by PewDiePie. MrBeast is more just, he's like alienating in extent instead of in type. It's like, I know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I've seen it before. I hate it.
Makes me feel sick.
I really hate it when you do it.
But it's legible to me.
I do know what it is. Whereas
it's a classic narrative structure, right? Like it's, as we've talked about, it's reality TV, it's challenge, it's sport. Like it's all of those things in the narrative arc that he's just nailed every single point to it. But as opposed to this weird thing that really feels like it's a recent phenomenon, the parasocial thing where, you just tune in to watch someone else play video games 4 hours a day and like develop a weird relationship there which doesn't have like an entertainment arc. They're just supposed to be your funniest friend or whatever it is.
Right. It's the closest thing I can think of that pre-existed it is talk radio, where you just sort of maybe you keep it on in the background. But I think that maybe part of the story here is also just that as YouTube gets bigger and bigger, you need stuff that isn't quite so neat. Like it seems weird to call PewDiePie niche when he's got hundreds of millions of subscribers, but that is niche in the context of a website that sees billions of people watch stuff every month. So as YouTube gets bigger, your biggest voice is on it. I mean, I think the fact that T-Series is still the biggest channel is telling that it's like a music and entertainment channel with a huge like regular old media presence in one of the biggest countries on the planet.
Totally.
It's sort of only natural that that's going to be one of the biggest things. And so it also is sort of natural that like a guy who is kind of doing more mainstream entertainment is going to be one of the biggest faces.
Totally.
But I do think in some sense he has this kind of hybrid, like he's doing these reality shows, he's doing stuff that's familiar to us in all these ways, but he's really intelligent about how he talks to his audience, how he thinks about his audience, like pitching them to subscribe.
Yeah.
You know, like what we're talking about, where he there's this sort of idea that they're part of the MrBeast movement. That becomes a thing.
He did open up like MrBeast Espanol, which is like just his channel replicated, just with like dubbed Spanish, which because he was like, I had a crazy insight that only X number of people on Earth speak English, and then so I decided to translate it into Spanish, and I got access to this whole new market. And it's like, obviously all his fans were like, that is so. The business genius on display here is almost incomprehensible to me. But I guess it is smart because most people don't. I don't think that there are many creators that can be bothered doing that or have the resources to have someone translate and dub and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Although I guess you could probably do it with AI now or whatever. But anyway, for now, MrBeast, phenomenal business genius.
What about the burgers? Speaking of business genius, what's happening? What's the burger thing?
He stopped doing the burger. He did this thing where he during the pandemic. He launched. It's not even like you guys know ghost kitchens where you sort of have any restaurant can go on DoorDash and call themselves whatever they want.
Totally,
call themselves like Thai food near me and just serve pad Thai and it's like not.
Oh yeah,
not a
yeah.
real restaurant or whatever.
Totally.
So MrBeast, he's not even doing a ghost kitchen thing. He's licensing a MrBeast burger, which I suppose I never have eaten it, so I don't have the pleasure of having tasted the MrBeast burger, but he would license the MrBeast burger name and I suppose the recipe, whatever that would entail for a hamburger, to any restaurant that wanted to serve it on DoorDash, and it was really extremely popular for a while. There is one MrBeast burger location, I think, in the huge new mall right across the river from me in New Jersey that I have yet to make it across to.
You got you were over in SF or whatever in one of your trips recently, and you got the inside word that the burger was not long for this world.
Well, yeah. Well, apparently he's run into the problem that comes with all this sort of ghost kitchen, drop shipping, what have you. Businesses, there's no quality control. And like, I mean, how hard is it to fuck up what I guess is a cheeseburger? I haven't looked into it. I don't know what's in it, but I'm assuming it's just a cheeseburger. Because I mean, the idea is like, let's make it as easy and replicable so any sort of neighborhood business can make it. But some people had great MrBeast burgers. Other people, substandard. That's not great for the brand. And then apparently now he's I believe he's suing the company that he partnered with.
I didn't even realize that. I mean, it tells you something about. He is extremely anal about. I mean, he talks about this in all of his YouTube interviews. It's like part of the thing is he's like, I'm sure he's not a great boss. Like I have not encountered anything that would suggest. Please don't sue me, MrBeast. I'm not saying anything other than like I personally would not want to work for him. I think he probably has exacting standards.
No, totally. I think the New York Times did a story 2 years ago. The failing New York Times trying to find something to cancel MrBeast for, and basically which said exactly that he probably not super pleasant to work for. I think he has like 250 staff now or something.
He's got a huge staff,
which is absurd. And I guess you need that to execute. Because obviously a lot of his videos are actually quite complicated.
You can't cure blind people by yourself.
No, totally. I mean, that's the next step. The next step is that like
it's been done 2,000 years ago, mate.
We'll have the YouTuber, the YouTuber himself aiming. But that's the relentless quest for optimization. You got to be a little bit of an asshole to make that.
I mean, I joked. The joke that I think is kind of true is like he got bored during the pandemic that he had sort of beaten the YouTube algorithm, so he wanted to try the DoorDash algorithm, and he seems to have just beat that too. That he's just like hitting platform after platform, creating things to beat everything.
I think his risk is over optimization. He's gonna because I mean that's the different thing about YouTube as opposed to like reality TV is that there wasn't that feedback mechanism where you could, sit there in every episode of The Price is Right or whatever, just like militarily optimize it for whatever audience you're trying to get and tweak the titles of the show and all that kind of stuff. You can do that now. And I think that eventually you fade into a singularity with it, right? Like I think that the best example, because, a good way to bring it home is that PewDiePie, streamers, Twitch streamers, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, Twitch is still huge. There are a lot of big streamers, but I feel like their moment in the culture has receded a little bit. You don't hear about them quite as often as you did 2 years ago. In tandem with the esports stuff, which was a bust. And obviously, we talked about it in the episode like a month ago or whatever, like the
NPC,
the NPC
TikTok
streamers,
NPC.
right? Like the woman who's sitting there going, "Oh, yum, blah blah blah," receiving her cherries, and she goes, "Thank you." Like that's just that format. When people realize, like, you actually don't need the rest of this crap. You just need that immediate feedback mechanism where, like, some low functioning guy can sit there and be like, "Say hello to me. Say hello to me." Like, you don't need to
find your perverts. You find your rich perverts, and just that's all you
find your 1,000 true perverts.
No, but I mean, like, if the end goal of all of this, which is dissociation, which I think it pretty much is like
the drum circle in the cave. That's what we're doing. We're doing
all
the drum
we want to
circle
do is dissociate. Then the end state, like you were saying, has we reached our final form of media with like the MrBeast stuff, with hitting those numbers and stuff? I don't think it is. I think it basically is just like repetition, familiar face, like NPC stuff, just tapping the dopamine button in our brain like constantly, and time just seeming to go by without like having any negative thoughts.
I think
I don't know.
The final form of content is
like once MrBeast is NPCing.
Yeah, but the final form of content is this podcast, the Down Round podcast, just over the top of like the 3D Pipes screensaver from Windows 95.
Yeah,
just that pure vibes. Us talking, about MrBeast
Mm.
and just the pipes.
I like the Subway Rider guy. That's the one I need on.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to watch.
The
If I'm going
Subway
to watch
guy-
Wait and See or something, I need the Subway guy.
The Subway guy,
Subway.
totally. The cars spinning. I'm shocked MrBeast hasn't. I
Hasn't introduced his own special like TikTok ADD.
There's definitely been.
He's got his Spanish channel. He's got his philanthropy
And then
channel. And he's got his like completely addled Swiss cheese brain channel.
Exactly. No, totally. I mean, there's a whole generation of people that he's helping raise that are going to need that. He's got to think about it. Anyway,
I do wonder. I mean, the only question I have about MrBeast is like, how long? Like, is there a point at which he gets? Speaking as a 37-year-old, like, is 37-year-old MrBeast fun? Is that as fun as 25-year-old MrBeast?
I didn't realize he was that young. Yeah, I think you do need to have the like vitality of youth or whatever.
I mean, he's got to get on. He's got to get on the baldness pills ASAP. He's got to be doing laser stuff. He can just stay. If he can stay 25, then he's fine.
Yeah,
You know,
the red light changes.
The minute that you can smell the age on him.
Yeah, they got to get him on that Brian Johnson.
Yeah, exactly.
Anti-aging, looking like a reptile vibe.
Yeah,
but
no, not for me, mate. I'm just gonna watch the DVD logo like it nearly hit the corners.
That's a good one.
Now we're talking.
Now we're talking. Yeah.
Max, thank you so much for coming on to Down Rant Podcast and illuminating us about
me. It's been a blast.
The world's most interesting man. Is there anything that you want to plug apart from this article and your newsletter?
Please,
of course.
Please subscribe to my newsletter. Read Max. Maxread.substack.com is the URL. You can also just Google Max Read. It's not the genetic test, and it's not a hard drive. It's the newsletter.
It's a newsletter.
Max Read. Read Max.
Yeah,
amazing. All right. Well, thanks again. And have yourself a wonderful evening.
If you're listening to this, did you know there's another world out there where you get a second episode of Down Round a week?
Yep, it's called Down Round Premium.
That's right, and there's no interruptions.
No interruptions, no ads. 2 episodes a week, including the free one you're getting right now, plus another one.
Yeah, $7 a month, not a week, a month. Downround.net. Downround.net. Instant access to the whole back catalogue as well. You've got so much to catch up on.
There's so much. Get around it.